Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Dark History's very own Hatchet wielding Spinster, Part 6. Today we're talking about the life of Lizzie Borden. On August the 8th, Lizzie Borden would be part of an inquest hearing before trial. She would request to have her family attorney present, but was actually denied because the state statute at the time would say that at an inquest hearing, a lawyer or attorney could not be present as it was just a private matter. While at the hearing, Lizzie Borden would be prescribed several doses of morphine to calm her nerves, and it may be possible that this greatly affected her testimony because of it. It is said that during the hearing she was very erratic and at times would refuse to answer any questions, even if it was questions that was very beneficial to her and the case. During the hearing, she would often contradict herself and give alternating accounts of the morning in question. For example, when she was asking about the morning in question when Andrew would arrive home, she would first tell the people present that she was in the kitchen reading a magazine. Then she would change her story again and say that she was in the kitchen ironing some clothes. And then finally, she would say that she wasn't even in the kitchen at all, but actually coming down the stairs. They would eventually end the inquest hearing and push for her trial around June of 1893. And it's around this time that the song that I had read to you in the beginning of the video, it is said that this is where this song actually came from as people were waiting to this trial of Lizzie Borden. There would also be a second verse to the song regarding Lizzie Borden and the dead people that possibly she had murdered. If you remember, the infamous first verse would go, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. And when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. The second verse, which is much darker, would say, Andrew Borden is now dead. Lizzie Borden hit him in the head. In heaven he will sing, on the gallows she will swing. Her trial would start on June 5th, 1893, and it's around this time that this little folk song started to become very popular and sung throughout the town. But this would not be the only axe murder that would happen in Fall River. June 1st of that same year, right before the trial, there would actually be another axe murder in Fall River. The victim would be Bertha Manchester, and she would be found hacked to death in the kitchen of her home. And the similarities at the time were very, very similar, almost eerie, and it was almost suspected that Lizzie Borden was innocent, and the person who had possibly hacked up Bertha in this incident may have been the person responsible of killing not only Andrew, but Abby too. The murderer would actually be caught in 1894 and would be a Portuguese immigrant named Jose Correia de Melo. And it was also proven that around the time of the murder of Andrew and Abby, he was nowhere near the vicinity of the Borden home when the murders took place. The major point of argument during the trial would be the broken handle that would be found in the basement of the Borden home. And the defense would often argue this and say it could not be the murder weapon, as it was a hatchet that killed both Abby and Andrew. And if it had been the actual handle that had killed both of them, depending and regarding just how ferocious and barbaric the murder was, there would be bloodstains on the handle. The defense would also try to argue and say if Lizzie Borden was in fact the murderer, how come during the investigation by the police none of them would find bloody clothes? But during this statement, Alice Russell would actually testify that on August the 8th, she would find Lizzie Borden burning a shredded up dress in the kitchen. And she would tell Alice that she was burning it because she had brushed against some wet paint that would ruin the dress. And ironically enough, even though Russell would give this testimony, no one would argue this statement or bring up the fact that why she had burnt just a dress shortly before her inquest hearing and trial. I would also like to make a little side note. During the trial of Lizzie Borden, it would not only have one judge, but actually 12. And during the trial, they would talk about Lizzie's presence at the home around the time of the murder. And once again, Lizzie Borden would change her story again, but this time she would say that she wasn't upstairs, she wasn't in the kitchen, but at the time of the murder, she was in the barn. And she would say that she was in the barn for about 23 to 30 minutes at the time. And surprisingly, there would be a neighbor that would testify at the trial and say he in fact had seen Lizzie Borden leaving the barn at some point in that day. And Lizzie would say that she would walk inside the house and find her father murdered, where she would call Bridget Sullivan downstairs to go check on her father. And when Sullivan would come down, she would strictly order Sullivan not to go into her room, but to run outside and go fetch Dr. Bowen. Now, during the autopsy of Andrew Borden and Abby Borden, the autopsy would actually remove their skulls. And this would actually be presented as evidence in the trial. And upon seeing this, Lizzie Borden would actually faint on spot. It was also admitted in court that around the time before the murder, that Lizzie Borden would actually request that a druggist to be prescribed some prussic acid or cyanide to clean some sealskin cloaks that had gotten dirty. But the autopsy report would show at the trial that there was no poison in their systems at the time. On June 20th, 1893, the trial would reach for deliberation for a verdict. The verdict would take about an hour and a half, which the jury would come out and acquitted Lizzie Borden of both murders of her father and stepmother. Lizzie Borden would actually walk outside of the courthouse and tell the reporters that she was the happiest woman in the world. Throughout Lizzie's life, she would often be the prime suspect of the murders, but nothing really came about it. There would be various authors that would give their own theories about Lizzie Borden. One would say that she performed the murders in a fugile state, while another author would speculate and suggest that she performed the murders because she was possibly physically and sexually assaulted by her father. But nothing has confirmed nor denied this theory, and incest definitely would not be a topic of discussion during this time and period. It's also been theorized that Lizzie would perform the murders after being caught in a homosexual relationship with Bridget Sullivan. And after getting caught by Abby is right around the time that she would actually murder Abby and would run to her father for support, and her father would be just as mad as Abby was, so she would just kill Andrew Borden and Abby for not supporting her homosexual decision. It has been theorized that Lizzie Borden was a lesbian, but Bridget Sullivan would ended up marrying a man and having children in Montana. Not only would she get married in Montana to another person she would work under, but on her deathbed, she would give a deathbed confession to her sister that during the trial, she had alternated her testimony about Lizzie Borden to protect her. Another theory is that John Morse, the uncle to Emma and Lizzie, would actually perform the murders, because he was someone that rarely came over to Andrew Borden's house, especially after his sister had passed away. And ironically, he would pay them a visit and actually stay the night before their murders. Another theory is that Emma Borden would actually be the one to murder Andrew and Abby. It is known that she did not like Abby, and even though she claimed to be at Fairhaven during the murders, a lot of people have speculated that she would secretly travel to the house to murder them and travel back to Fairhaven in time for them to receive the message that her family had been murdered. The two girls would eventually buy a house and would get into a fight where they would never speak to each other again after Lizzie would throw a party for an actress, and this would create an argument for both girls to never speak each other again, as I said. Lizzie Borden would pass away on June 1st, 1927. At her death, she would be worth $250,000, or around $5 million in today's money.